double standards and hypocritical behavior of some members of the opposition during these budget debates. And I wanted to address two issues. It's important that the history of the bauxite and the sugar sector is not rewritten by those who comprehensively destroyed these two sectors. And in both sectors, those that destroy it seek to carry a political narrative. And that political narrative always try to position themselves as the ones who somehow cared about this industry, cared about the workers and the communities that these industries supported. And I wanted us to spend some time tonight to distill some of the facts, to analyze some of the facts surrounding the bauxite and the sugar industry, so that the selfish desires of the destroyers who now seek to rewrite themselves as promoters of this industry would be exposed. Tonight, I've asked the Minister of Finance to join me. Policy matrix through which the economy functions, through which the government functions, and through which the economy is supported. And I want us to do this in a way that everyone can understand it. And everyone can understand what the truth is and what are the facts surrounding the bauxite and sugar industry. First of all, we have to understand what these industries mean to our country and our economy, and how these industries are critically integrated into the economic livelihood of the citizens of our country, especially from the regions that these industries are located. And it is the guiding philosophy of the People's Progressive Party civic government that we support industries that has that trickle-down effect on the economies of regions and communities. It is not only the extraction of bauxite that makes up the bauxite industry. It is all the support services. It is the revenue that is created that is then respent in the local economy to create wealth at the regional level, to create wealth at the community level, and to enable the economy to not only expand itself, but to enable the economy to support enhanced livelihood in these communities. So let's take a look at a few slides and have a discussion around these slides. And then I will ask the Minister of Finance to explain to the population the planning framework around bauxite now and in the coming years, and how we are working to position this sector to ensure that we keep alive the jobs and create even more opportunities ahead of us. So let's look at the facts. In 2014, and I'm going to go back to periods of our history when different government was in office. In 2014, the last full year of the PPPC government, over 1,200 persons were employed directly in the bauxite sector. Directly. You're talking there about 4,800 Guyanese who are directly dependent on the bauxite industry for their livelihood, for their income, in sending their children to school, in creating opportunities for their families, in building household wealth, in paying their loans, in owning a home. 48 persons directly. Now, the indirect beneficiaries, as he will tell you, goes into the tens of thousands. But what happened? So in 2014, the PPC civic government left office and left 1,200 persons working in the bauxite industry. That this opposition claim, this region that bauxite is heavily invested in, this opposition claimed that they love this region. And in fact, they benefited politically from the type of narrative that they take to the region. But look at what happened during their period in office. So we left them with 1,200 direct jobs, 4,800 persons who were benefiting directly, that is 1,200 families. What happened when we came back in 2020? When we came back in office in 2020, after 5 years of APNU+AFC government, the number of persons directly employed in the bauxite sector in Region 10 dropped from 1,200 to 600. 50% of the people who are directly making a living, to put it in the ordinary man's language, 50% of the people who are enjoying a livelihood from the industry the PPP Civic left in 2015. When we came back in office, they lost their jobs. 600. Why? Because of bad policies, mismanagement, the high-handed approach, the iron fist approach that is associated with APNU+AFC government. What is important to also note is that during the period 2015 to 2019, the sector grew by an average of only 1.8%. During the period they were in government, the sector grew by an average of 1.8%. In 2024, this year, this very sector that we left functioning, that we came back into office and met on its knees, on decline, collapsing, about to close. What did we do? We don't look at political opportunity. We look at opportunity to serve the people and build our country. So what did we do? In 2024, we encourage investment. We lay out a policy framework that sought to reignite confidence in the sector. Despite COVID, despite the increase in the shipping costs, despite the sanctions on the main operator, all of this occurred whilst we are in government. Did we walk away? Did we walk away? Did we abandon? No. Instead, we are projecting the sector to grow by 60%. Why? Because investment in the sector is now expanding. And why is investment expanding? Because of confidence, because of policy, because of a framework that investors can trust and rely on. These are the things that stimulate investment. So Ashley, you can share some views. on this initial assessment?
Certainly, Mr. President, and thank you very much, in fact, for inviting me to join you on this, this live. You mentioned quite rightly the APNU+AFC's claim to have a special relationship with the people of Region 10. And as you have pointed out on many an occasion, and as several members of your cabinet have pointed out, this claim that the APNU makes, that they have a special relationship with the people of Region 10, is simply not supported by their actions if you look across the entire period of our country's economic history. And I want, in fact, Mr. President, to go back a little bit and say that there have actually been, if you look at the history of the bauxite industry, there have actually been two periods in which the APNU/PNC have, in fact, actively participated in the destruction of the bauxite industry. I want to go back, sir, to the pre-1992 period. And Londoners who have been around for long enough would know, and the people of Kokwani, the people of Aichuni, would know that there was once a time, the late 1960s, the 1970s for sure, when Guyana's bauxite industry was really occupying a prominent position in the world of bauxite production. In fact, there was once a period when we were one of the largest producers of certain grades of bauxite. Of course, we know that the then PNC nationalized the bauxite industry, brought it into state ownership, and we know what that led to. It led to gross mismanagement of the industry, lack of investment in the industry, with the result that towards the late 1980s, the industry was in a state of complete collapse. And so we mustn't forget also, if I may say so, sir, we mustn't forget that the PNC in their original manifestation presided over, and here I'm speaking of the 70s to 80s, a collapse of the bauxite industry.
Well, we just put up a slide here, Ashley, so the population can understand what we're talking about. And this slide demonstrates, and we'll give it in an easier format in a few moments. But this slide demonstrates the production, what took place between periods in our history. But before we go there, there's a word to describe, because I see it. I see this political opportunism that I cannot tolerate anymore. This political opportunism that we must address. And that is why I want to address this issue from a factual perspective. So let's go back to that slide, this graph. Look at the period 1979 to 1992. And by the way, this was the heydays of bauxite. Look at the production. Important to note is that during this period, when we were going into the 1993 elections, the industry was in a state of collapse. And the narrative then was that the PPP civic government has no time with bauxite and would have abandoned bauxite and linden. That was a narrative that these same political opportunists used at that time. Instead, when the PPP came into office, just like what took place in Wales when they were in office, the people were in distress. The economy was in distress. What did we do? We subsidized services. And we continued to find ways of getting investment in bauxite to keep the industry alive, to keep the industry going. And you can see that between 1993 and 2014, with all the shocks, remember, we had the financial shock that saw the drying up of capital globally. With all of that, look at the red line. Between 1993 and 2014, we kept the industry alive, investment was there, and production continued. And then look what happened. in 2014 to 2020, look at the third dotted line. The 2015 to the 2020 period, look what happened. Look where the production went. After promising in 2015 that they will ensure that bauxite is bigger and better, the political opportunism in the promise is exposed by the numbers. No interest was paid in it. Look where it fell. And then look what we took off in 2020. And look where we're taking it up back in 2023. And we are projecting it to grow even further. So, what basis are the political opportunists using in this argument that, and it's such a self-serving argument. We'll come to sugar because it is one of the things that I'm going to address deeply, because this is one of the diversionary political tools that they continue to use to create the opportunism for them in the divisive politics that they pursue, using bauxite and sugar. That is always low-hanging fruit for them, you know. Of course, in rice, they promised $9,000 per bag, and when they came into government, they said that's private business. But it is time for us to expose this type of political opportunism. Let's move to the next slide. This gives you a better picture, Ashley.
Sure. So what this shows is it shows similar to what the previous chart does, but it kind of zeroes in on the averages. So it shows that over the period 1979 to 1992, these are the dictatorship years. Average production was 1.5 million metric tons. When we came into government, exactly like you said, Mr. President, despite all of the scaremongering that they engaged in relation to our party and our government's position in relation to bauxite, we were able to secure international investment in the sector in an environment that was, and at a period where the global economy went through several shocks, commodity price shocks, the financial crisis, etc. We were able to attract international investors in Linden and in the Berbice River that saw us producing at an average of almost 2 million metric tons over that period. And mind you, that's the entire period that we were in government. Production averaged over 1.9, almost 2 million metric tons per annum. As soon as we left office, that average collapsed. And so you see during the 2015 to 2020 period, an average of only 1.4 million metric tons. And of course, within that is the effect of the, exactly as you described it earlier, sir, the high-handedness, the anti-investor and anti-worker posture that was taken by the APNU+AFC that resulted in Rusal pulling out of the Berbice River, closing down the Berbice River bauxite operation, and putting hundreds of Guyanese people out of work. And that is literally what we're seeing there by the reduced average production of, just like I said, just over, less than 1.5 million metric tons per annum during the 2015 to 2020 period. And that has been a historic pattern, anti-investor and anti-worker posture taken by APNU+AFC.
Also importantly, Ashley, these things, you see a lot of people underestimate the work of the government. These production figures don't occur by accident. It's careful planning. It's policy formulation. It's having the right fiscal incentives. It's creating the conducive environment. And that is the difference between what we do and what they do. And it's not only about production and the production numbers. The bauxite industry kept the Berbice River alive in the sense that the dredging and the dredging costs that is associated with keeping the draft in the Berbice River so critical for the expansion and development of everything from a production perspective coming out of the Berbice River, including timber, lumber, including raw materials. And then you have to look at the supporting services, whether it's mechanical, machining, the hospitality services, restaurants, the markets. All of these are supported services that benefit from the sector when it's performing well. And that is what we understand. That these sectors are not standing alone, that they are too integrally integrated in the economy at the regional community level for us not to pay attention and to ensure its survival. Let's look at the period 2015 to 2020. This is the collapse. And we're going now back. As I said, we're examining only the facts. Look at where we were in 2015. Look at where we took it over in 2020. The sharpest decline in output occurred under the APNU+AFC administration in the history of bauxite. Even worse than the earlier period of the PNC rule. The worst, the sharpest decline was in 2020. And who were in charge when we had the sharpest decline? The same bunch of political opportunists who are speaking now. They were the ones in charge. Let us go to the next slide. Let us examine some of the headlines. Look, can you imagine a policymaker making statements like these? This is Coretta MacDonald. Government must end Russian bauxite companies' ruthlessness. Louis Lam Scott, other Labour Ministry official for incompetence in handling Rusal dispute. This was the headline over that period. Let's move on. Rusal fires 326 workers, suspends bauxite operations. All enough to shut operations after 15 years. After 15 years. 132 workers to lose jobs. I'm just reminding you, this was the headline during that period. Let's move on. What took place? Left them with 1,200 jobs. We lost 600 jobs. Ashley, go through with our viewers now how we are working. What was the state of the industry that we took over in 2020 and how we are rebuilding it, because one investment alone will create 1,000 new jobs.
Absolutely.
So let's go through what we inherited, the mess we inherited, and how we are rebuilding from that mess and what the projection is.
Sure, certainly, Mr. President. So you mentioned just now that not only did production collapse, but the economic life of entire communities collapsed. So Kwakwani, Aichuni, Linden, where many of the Berbice River workers came from, New Amsterdam, where many of the workers who were working in the Berbice River also came from. So the economic life in these communities collapsed, exactly as happened also in the sugar industry, in the sugar producing communities. So having inherited that situation, we set about immediately trying to, first of all, resuscitate the industry in the circumstances in which we found it, creating an investor-friendly environment once again, generating optimism and a positive outlook for the sector and an investor-friendly outlook in the sector. Mr. President, that led, in fact, to a significant investment being made by Bauxite.
Exactly. Let's just pull up the slide and look at what the next slide. Let's look at what is taking place since we assumed office in 2020. Now, here we go. Go on, Ashley.
Right. So that led to a major investment in a new kiln and in a new MAS project. In fact, Mr. President, I had the privilege of joining you and a number of our cabinet colleagues at the commissioning of this project. That was a big investment of $120 million in Kiln 15, which incidentally is the first new kiln built in Linden since the 1970s. It's expected to add 1 million tons of production in 2024 and will ramp up much further. It will create an immediate 500 job opportunities for Londoners and other Guyanese this year, and by the first quarter of 2025, another 500. So that's 1,000 new jobs for Londoners. But in addition to that, if I may add too, Mr. President, the investments that we're making in things like gas and energy and electricity, and bringing down the cost of electricity, will once again make it viable for Guyana to get back into alumina production. And so there are already a number of conversations taking place about other bauxite producing locations, including in the Berbice River, where we're trying to get an investor to go back in. And there are already conversations taking place about getting us back to a point, harnessing our gas reserves, which is, incidentally is another project that the APNU+AFC is attacking, bringing the gas to energy project and landing our gas on shore. There are a number of conversations aimed at getting investors back in the Berbice River to resume mining that ore, and also with investors, in a couple of other locations as well, but also being able once again to get us to a point where you can even potentially become an alumina producer.
And you see, our policies are not guided by political opportunism. Our policies are guided by what is best for the country, what is best for the people of our country. And it is, in my opinion, regardless of the sideshows that are orchestrated by some, supported by some claiming intellectualism in their support. Despite this, I believe that Guyanese are waking up to the reality. And the people of Region 10 understand. They had an experience of the PPP in government, the APNU+AFC in government, and they understand the guiding philosophy of this government. And the guiding philosophy of this government is about creating wealth, building prosperity, and improving the living conditions and livelihood of Guyanese all over our country. That is the guiding philosophy. We don't have any political opportunism in our messaging. Our messaging is straight, and the people of our country can rely on our messaging, just like investors can rely on our policies. Because these are important things if we're to build trust in our country and build trust in our policy-making matrix. You can't dance around with your policies. No one will take you seriously. You have to outline and articulate your policies clearly, define the policies, and then stick by them. And we have defined very clearly our program and our policies in our manifesto. And we are today very delighted to say our manifesto is almost completely implemented. And that is what we were elected on. And we are going many steps forward to integrate our society, to expand the economic base, to open up new opportunities, and to create wealth at every level. I want us now to take a look at sugar. But the first thing I want us to do, because I'm speaking about a guiding philosophy, and these political opportunists are trying to rewrite again their history in this industry. And I will not go far back. We're going to go to when they were in government and examine the statement by one of the then vice president. And there are many statements we can examine. I'm just going to use one. On what was their guiding, I see them on all kind of television stations in Region 6 now. Again, trying to misdirect and reorient the narrative to fulfill their political opportunism. But I want to remind our viewers remind Guyanese on their guiding philosophy. Let's look at this video from the then Vice President. Now
We have spent prior to what was transformational was the right sizing of the sugar industry so that you don't pour good money behind bad sectors and billions of dollars. To spend so much money on sugar is pouring good money behind bad, Mr. Finance Minister.
Good. So that's it. That's his philosophy. And this is a man and a government that sent home thousands of workers directly, affecting over 40,000 people directly, killing economies all over this country, sending more than 25,000 persons directly and indirectly on the breadline, taking hundreds of children out of school when they close the industry. And you would believe that there will be some remorse. This statement he has made, that the investment we are making in sugar is a bad business, and pouring money down something that is useless. How more irresponsible can this man get? But that is their guiding philosophy. They cannot help it. So even in their political opportunism, their guiding philosophy is exposed. So they don't see the benefits of bringing back the thousands of workers we have brought back directly and indirectly. As a result, people can send their children back to school. The investment we are making now to modernize the sector, to mechanize the fields and the harvesting, this is not important. The role the sugar estate play in supporting agriculture and the drainage and irrigation system in the fields. But this individual, political opportunist, is reminding us of their guiding philosophy. And I wanted us to take note of that reminder, because they don't understand the intricate nature of the economy. One would believe that, having seen what took place in Wales, that entire district, not only Wales, from Friesland, coming all the way to Gulagrange, in the Canal Polars, thousands of private cane farmers went bankrupt. Thousands went home. An entire market was shut down completely, with hundreds of vendors. Stores, supermarkets, everything closed. That is not of concern to him. But let us remind ourselves of what took place with such policies. Let's take a look. video give you an understanding. The first video give you an understanding of what they did in the 5 years. Look at what is taking place now. That is what took place in Wales, in Berbice. And let me make this point. We are aware that things are changing. That is why we are working on a system, and very soon we'll be collaborating with the union and workers so that we can find a mechanism through which we can improve and increase the wages of these workers. Not only did more than 25,000 people lost their livelihood during that period, but since we came back, thousands of jobs, directly and indirectly, has been recreated. But we are not satisfied with that. We are now working on a plan to up the skill level of our cane harvesters so that they can be part of the mechanization project, operating the machines. But more importantly, that we can now have a new form of operation. One of the things we're examining is how we can optimize productivity by moving to a more contract form within the industry itself. So we understand clearly that not only do we have to rebuild this industry and keep it and make the right investments, but we have to find a formula that will improve the skill level of our workers and that will enhance their income and livelihood. And that conversation is ongoing. We are not a government that will hide away from issues. We're not saying that sugar is not a challenge. This is a major challenge for us. But we are committed to ensuring that we succeed. When we came into office, miles of ponds, rotten, their estates were reduced to scrap metal yards. The fields were forested. The entire drainage and irrigation system completely dismantled. Friends, we had to rebuild from the scratch. We had to rebuild from zero. After they took $30 billion. And I don't know if they have the image, but I would love to show you what they did with it. State-of-the-art bars, an entertainment complex. That was their interest. That was their priority. But that philosophy has not changed. That philosophy has not changed. Let me remind you of how that closure affected ordinary people. Look at this.
2016. I worked 27 years with Gaisuku. And the day that I hear that the last day for cane harvesting, I could hold my head on hollow when I threw the last bundle.
My name is Gordon Thomas. I'm former sugar worker of Wales Estate. Here is a ghost town, actually. Not actually, here's a ghost town.
My husband's name is Donald Garnett, and he's a cane cutter. When the estate works, you know you got the income, whether monthly, fortnightly, weekly, and everybody get a job, including the children them that come out of school. Even that they didn't get a result from the CXC, they were able to go to the field lab and work. So everybody get a piece of the pie. But since the estate finished, we ain't getting nothing.
My favorite subject is math, and I love to go to school every day. But the passage was too much, and I tell my mom I want to stop because she couldn't afford it. I see the way she couldn't afford it, so I stopped. I used to attend in the secondary school, and I really want to go back to school, but the sugar plantation is closed down. And I'm living in a distance from the school, and you have to pay a lot of passage. And my mother only sell ice a day, and she's only makes $300, and that's just my brother passage alone. The people who used to work in the estate in our village used to assist us, but now they have to do schools, and we don't have no one help. Besides my big sister and my brother. Well, basically, my sister does mind us, but never mind she could mind us, but she can't afford to send us to school. She's buy the groceries, she's buy us things, and so we can't depend on her to do everything for us. And when my brother does go to sea and come back, he does send a race for us too. When I was school, I didn't always want to become a nurse.
I was employed 1980. Wow. And when it closed, I was 36 years working with Gaisuku throughout, and was very successful working with Gaisuku because I achieved a lot of things in life. I have my children where I work and sent to school, private school. They write the exam education. And when the estate closed 2016, was a disaster to the whole community and the whole region at whole. Because not only the people that work in the Gaisuku depend upon Gaisuku, the business people, the car people, and everybody. And it's not like when you go on job. When you go on job, you earn.
Very hard, very difficult for the year, about a year and a half. Because when the age of me there, I am 58 now, it's hard to get work. You go certain place and I get work.
Yeah, I work 20 years on this city and bring up 5 children. I build house, furnish house, do everything. Send them to school. That's a small one. And when the city closed down, this big boy here, this is the second one. This is potential. And we have to send it out because you have to get some money to get things for use in the school. And it was rough. You had to take it out to school, up to farm, 5 liters. So it be rough. Plus, it be hard for me for mind them. Left out there.
Yes. These guys who have not changed their ways. That is what your policies did to people between 2015 and 2020. That was the results of your policies. That was the result of your callous action. That was the result of your callous behavior. That was the result of your high-handed arrogance on the ordinary people of our country. You can't escape that. You cannot escape that. But still, you refuse to change your position. I guess that's your guiding philosophy on that side. That is the APNU+AFC guiding philosophy. You know, worse than that, is that even after sending the people home, you refuse to pay them their severance. Ashton, you recall that?
Certainly. In fact, Mr. President, I mean, it is so tragic, and those stories that we saw were repeated thousands of times over in community after community. Wales, Enmore, Skeldon, Rosehall, Kanji, in so many places. And like you mentioned just now, having put people out of income, taken away their incomes, taken away their jobs, the APNU+AFC then refused to pay people their legally entitled severance and had to be forced to do so by court action being taken to compel them to do so. And so not only were their jobs and their livelihoods taken away, but even their lawful entitlements to pension, which they're entitled to under, like I said, under the labor laws of the country, causing even further devastation and desperation to these families. So it really was a tragic situation. And you mentioned too, sir, that, you know, the deceit. You know, the APNU+AFC liked COIs. You know, they spent a lot of time doing many COIs, commissions of inquiry. And they actually did a commission of inquiry. They launched a commission of inquiry into the sugar industry. And their own commission of inquiry stopped short of recommending closure of the estates. But they still went ahead and closed down the estates, which basically tells you that they were intent on closing down the estates and putting these people
They
out
have
of
no
work.
remorse. Look at the most recent statement.
And shockingly, up to today, notwithstanding that they have now seen how devastating this was to families, individuals, families, entire communities, entire villages. Like you said, shops were closed down. It literally, markets, people weren't selling anything in the markets. Despite seeing this impact, there is absolutely no remorse up to today.
Well, fellow Guyanese, I think it's very important that we examine all the sectors from a fact-based foundation. I want us to look at results, facts, and the reality. And I intend, as I said before, to go through every single sector, every single policy of this government, and to examine factually and by results how we have performed, and factually how the alternative performed. This is not the time in our country for political opportunism. This is a time for hard work. This is a time for debates on ideas, critical analysis, and we are open to criticism once it's constructive. But a narrative that seeks to mislead people politically, and a narrative that seeks to reset historical truths would not be allowed to flourish. We'll correct those narratives. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We're not going to slow down. For a matter of fact, I've made it very clear that this year we're going to step harder on the accelerator to bring prosperity to every home in our country. I thank you, and God bless you.